Now listen to me, we all want to live in a nice, quiet place. You work hard all day long. You come home, you want to kick your feet up, you want to relax. But let me tell you something, sometimes the drama lives right next door. You share walls, you share fences, you share the air you breathe. And when things go wrong with a neighbor, oh boy, they can go really wrong. Our story begins in a quiet, unassuming corner of England. The kind of place where the biggest drama is usually a debate over whose turn it is to trim the hedges. But beneath this tranquil suburban veneer, a battle was brewing. Meet Tobe, a man who cherished his home and, more specifically, the driveway that came with it. It was his patch of land, his private property, a simple convenience he'd worked hard for. Unfortunately, his neighbor didn't seem to grasp the concept of private property. Day after day, she would use his driveway as her personal parking lot. It wasn't just an occasional mistake, it was a pattern of blatant disrespect. She'd leave her car for hours, sometimes days, completely blocking Tobe's access. He couldn't get to work, he couldn't run errands. He was a prisoner in his own home. Like any rational person, Tobe tried to resolve things peacefully. He started with polite requests, which were ignored. He moved on to leaving polite notes on her windshield, which she'd toss aside with a smirk. The conversations grew more heated, but she remained defiant. He even looked into getting her car towed, but in the UK, parking on private land is often a civil matter, not a police one. The authorities were powerless, and the towing companies wouldn't touch it. Tobe was stuck in a bureaucratic nightmare, his frustration mounting. Finally, after one particularly infuriating week of being blocked in, something inside Tobe snapped. The endless cycle of disrespect had reached its limit. He realized that if reason and rules wouldn't work, he'd have to speak a language she couldn't possibly ignore. With a newfound sense of purpose, he drove to the local hardware store. He didn't buy a bigger sign or a new lock, he bought several bags of quick-drying cement. He waited patiently, like a predator stalking its prey. The moment her car once again trespassed onto his land, Tobe sprang into action. This wasn't an act of rage, it was a work of meticulous, calculated artistry. He mixed the concrete, wheelbarrow by wheelbarrow, and began pouring. He constructed a perfect, solid concrete tomb around her vehicle, sealing it in on all four sides. He was no longer just a homeowner, he was a sculptor of justice. The next morning, the neighbor came out ready to go, only to be confronted by an immovable block of gray vengeance. Her car had been transformed into a permanent monument to her own inconsideration. Of course she called the police. But when they arrived, they were stumped. Tobe hadn't damaged her car, he had simply built a structure on his own property, a structure that just so happened to encase her vehicle. Legally, it was a masterpiece of malicious compliance. The point wasn't just made, it was set in stone. So what's the lesson here? It's pretty simple, really. Respect other people's property, that's it. When someone has a line drawn in the sand, or in their yard, you don't cross it. She ignored warnings. He pushed back. He had a whole lot of concrete and a whole lot of frustration. Before you be a difficult neighbor, think about Tobe and that concrete. Our next story takes us to a seemingly idyllic, historic neighborhood. You know the type, perfectly manicured lawns, charming old houses, and a thick rule book dictating everything from mailbox color to hedge height. This is where a woman named Zipporah lived. She wasn't looking for trouble, but in a community governed by a powerful historic commission, peace often meant conforming to a very narrow, very specific set of standards. Zipporah's request was modest. She wanted to build a simple privacy fence in her backyard. It wasn't an unreasonable desire, she just wanted a little seclusion from the world. But to her immediate neighbors, this was an unacceptable breach of the neighborhood's aesthetic. They didn't just disagree, they launched a full-scale campaign against her, arguing the fence would ruin historic sightlines. The Historic Commission, swayed by the vocal opposition, sided with them, denying her request. What followed was a bureaucratic nightmare. Zipporah was dragged to countless commission meetings, forced to defend her simple request over and over. Her neighbors filed formal complaints, citing obscure bylaws and whispering behind her back. It was no longer about a fence, it had morphed into a personal crusade, a concerted effort to make her life as difficult as possible. She felt bullied and isolated in her own community. Defeated but not broken, Zipporah channeled her frustration into research. She spent hours poring over the dense, jargon-filled pages of the historic district's regulations. She read every line, every subclause, and then she found it. A loophole. The rules were incredibly specific about structures, fences, sheds, additions, but they were completely silent on one crucial aesthetic detail: paint color. In that moment, a brilliant, colorful idea began to form. A light bulb didn't just go off, it exploded in a rainbow of possibilities. Her next trip wasn't to a commission meeting but to the paint store. She loaded her cart with gallons of the most vibrant, eye-popping colors she could find. Armed with her arsenal of pigments, she began the transformation. With every brushstroke, she wasn't just applying paint, she was reclaiming her property and painting over months of frustration. Her house became a canvas for her defiance. But the rainbow stripes were just the opening act. For the grand finale, she saved a special message for the neighbors who had started it all. On the side of the house that directly faced their property, she painted a final, unmistakable gesture. It was a giant, house-sized middle finger, a clear message of contempt delivered with artistic flair. Her home was instantly christened the Rainbow House of Spite. It became a local legend, a tourist attraction, and a permanent Technicolor headache for the Historic Commission and her neighbors. They couldn't force her to repaint it, she hadn't broken any rules. Zipporah had wanted a simple privacy fence. But what she got instead was a monument to malicious compliance, a vibrant, impossible-to-ignore testament to what happens when you push someone too far. So, what can we learn from a rainbow house, with a giant middle finger on the side? They focused on winning the fence battle and ended up with a tourist attraction of defiance, trading a small annoyance for a giant headache. Zipporah followed the letter of the law. It was a masterclass in malicious compliance, legal but destructive. This whole mess could have been avoided with conversation. Being right isn't always worth destroying your neighborhood. Alright, for our last story we delve into a classic conflict, the battle for peace and quiet in one's own home. It's a tale about a man pushed to his absolute limit, where polite requests and official channels failed, forcing him to turn to a truly unconventional solution. This is the story of Gary, and the night his neighborhood learned a valuable lesson about who they were living next to. Gary was a working man who valued his sleep, but his new neighbors operated on a different schedule. Every weekend, their house transformed into a nightclub. The bass didn't just leak through the walls, it vibrated through his floorboards, rattling his windows and his sanity. He tried asking nicely. He tried calling the police, but nothing worked. The patrol car would arrive, the music would dip, and the moment the taillights disappeared, the volume would be cranked right back up. His patience had run out, but Gary had a hobby he cultivated in his backyard. He kept bees. He found a strange tranquility in caring for his hives, a quiet order in the complex society of thousands of tiny creatures. And it was here that an idea began to form, a plan that was equal parts genius and madness. He knew that bees have a mortal enemy, hornets. The sound of a hornet swarm is an ancient, hardwired alarm signal that triggers an immediate, aggressive defensive response. He just needed to convince his bees that the party was a threat. So, one Saturday night, as the familiar, deafening thump began to shake his house, Gary put his plan into motion. He put on headphones, placed a powerful speaker next to his most populous hive, and hit play on a recording of an attacking hornet swarm. To the bees, it was a declaration of war. The response was instantaneous. A low hum escalated into a terrifying roar as they poured out of the hive. Drawn by the lights and vibrations from next door, the agitated swarm flew right over the fence. The effect was immediate. The thumping bass was abruptly replaced by screams of panic. The party ended not with a whimper, but with a frantic, chaotic exodus. By dawn, the neighbor's yard was a ghost town of abandoned cups and terrified silence. Gary finally had his peace and quiet, and the parties never happened again. It's a potent reminder that sometimes the most effective solutions are found not in rulebooks, but in a deep understanding of nature. The lesson from Gary and his bee army is about thinking outside the box. He didn't shout or pound doors, he used nature, but he also risked his bees and could have risked people with allergies. It felt like poetic justice, but it came at a cost, stress to his hives and a real danger if someone had been vulnerable. He delivered a message impossible to ignore, but at what price? Concrete cars, rainbow houses, angry bees, getting revenge can feel good for a moment. It feels like justice, but it can turn your life into a hostile place. You still have to live next to that person. Revenge is a heavy burden. It takes up space in your head and heart that could be used for better things. Is winning the war with your neighbor worth losing the peace within your own home? At the end of the day, what do we all really want? We want peace at home. Try talking one more time. Look into mediation. Consider other ways to solve the problem. Stand up for yourself. Protect your peace. Be firm, be fair, but be smart. The ultimate power move isn't revenge. It's being able to relax in your own home. That's the real victory. So next time you're pushed, pause. Choose peace over a revenge story. Protect your peace, but don't lose yourself defending it.